Hi everyone, and welcome to the 10th lesson in our Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde GCSE study guide series. If you haven't seen any of these videos before, what we're doing is we're going through all of the characters, the themes, basically key quotes, everything that you need context to do well in your GCSE literature exam. So if that seems like something that would be useful for you, then please consider watching the rest of the video. We've got Utterson, Jekyll, Hyde, Lanyon as characters all done already. We've got videos on those. Each of them has model paragraphs as well, so I'd highly recommend you check those out if you're about to sit this exam and you have some troubles with any of those characters. In terms of themes, we've also done good versus evil, violence, duality of nature, and repression. So again, if those are things you feel that you haven't got totally ready for the exams, then check those out. Today, we're going to go through a full model answer, and it's going to be an answer that's sort of looking at Lanyon and Jekyll and Hyde, basically. So we're just going to dive into that. We're going to look at what you need to do in your exam. In a nutshell, what you're looking to do regardless of your exam board, you're looking to show that you understand the question and you're answering it very directly. Most exam boards, that's called AO1. Show that you understand the text really well, like the characters, the setting, how it all fits together. That's also usually part of AO1. Picking out really good quotes, obviously. That's technically kind of between AO1 and what we call AO2, which is analysis. Obviously, you're going to analyze the quotes that you pick really well. You're going to break down language devices, structure, maybe word choices and the effects that those have and how those prove your ideas. So that's AO2. And then finally, AO3 for most of you is very important. So that's thinking about the reader response. For some of you, it's like how a reader generally might feel. For others, it's about how you as a reader specifically feel. For example, Cambridge GCSE, you have to say how you feel as the reader. So I felt this, I thought that. For AQA and some of the other exam boards, it's more just generally reader response, how a reader might feel. And context, context. So a lot of you need to put some good context in about what was going on, who was, in this case, Robert Louis Stevenson, the guy who wrote this, what was going on in the sort of mid-1800s when this was written, historically, socially, culturally, what was the world like? And you want to include that and match that in to your answers as well. So, we're going to do the same as we've been doing on a lot of these series lately, taking a sort of a fairly average essay and upgrading it to hopefully a sort of a level 9. So Lanyon and Jekyll essay here, but it has a healthy dose of Hyde in it as well. So the relationship between the characters and what that tells us, that's what this essay is all about. So Hyde has come to Lanyon's house to pick up the chemicals Lanyon has collected from Jekyll's laboratory. Jekyll doesn't know who Hyde is, and he immediately dislikes him. This is the usual thought of people seeing Hyde for the first time. So at the start of the passage, Lanyon doesn't like Hyde, and Hyde is desperate. He is frightened as he is grating his teeth and looking ghastly. So what I like about this essay straight away is that it doesn't really do much of an introduction. I don't think that at GCSE you need to worry too much about introductions. I think it's far better to just get straight into the content and, briefly explains what's going on in the extract. This was an extract-based question. Clearly, the extract is where Hyde goes to pick up the chemicals from Dr. Lanyon, which is from Lanyon's narrative, second penultimate chapter. But just straight away going into some quotes. Problem is, it hasn't been very well analysed, has it? Grating his teeth and looking ghastly. It's not very well analysed. To analyze this better, you would obviously say the adverb ghastly has connotations of someone who looks very, disheveled, intimidating. Therefore, we can understand why Lanyon feels desperate and frightened in this moment, and how the relationship between Lanyon and Hyde is that Lanyon is quite scared or intimidated, really, by Mr. Hyde. There's another detail that you could add, which is that Lanyon actually has a gun. He's got his revolver just in case things go wrong. So you've got that tenseness there as the reader. In terms of context, you would have to develop this out a bit more, but you would probably talk about Darwinism, or you would talk about psychology, like the id, the ego, the superego. But you need some of that. At the moment, this is a very low level first paragraph. Let's keep diving in. Lanyon tells Hyde to compose yourself, meaning to calm down. Hyde changes a bit as soon as he sees or has, the chemicals. Lanyon's interested in the chemicals and describes those for a paragraph. So we don't really see how Hyde is behaving or seeming then. That's really perceptive. Sometimes it's good to talk about what is not being focused on and how that can actually create an idea for you as the reader. So the fact that it's all about the chemicals and the reaction, it links to the fact that Lanyon is a scientist, but it does also obscure what Hyde is doing as he's doing this chemistry, right? We don't actually know what Hyde is like. We get the sense he's probably quite happy and full of energy doing this and excited, but we don't actually know for sure. So that is quite interesting. When he starts talking again, he has got cocky and starts to be rude to Lanyon. Now, I wouldn't use more slang terms like getting cocky or whatever. Like, that's a little bit too informal for an essay. So I would probably not do that. I would probably focus more on, saying he has become very arrogant, or he has become too overconfident or prideful, or use more academic language, more formal language. He uses fancy language that is more like Jekyll's language. He seems to make it sound bad, whatever Lanyon chooses. If he doesn't watch his Hyde's transformation, he's missing out on something amazing. But if he does watch it, it's because of the greed of curiosity. Greed is a bad thing, so it makes it sound like Lanyon can't control himself. That's absolutely true. The problem is with this one is we need quotes for both things, right? So if he doesn't watch the transformation, he's missing out on something amazing. That's analysis, but we haven't got a quote that's being analyzed here. So I'm not sure why. What you got to pick out what it is in which quotes or which language is being used to create that sense of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So we need a quote for that. The greed of curiosity and analyzing that, he's done a good job of that. I've realized I'm a bit sexist because whenever it's a bad essay, I always say he, and whenever it's a great essay, I always say she. So I shouldn't do that. It's not true. Obviously, boys can do brilliant essays and girls can do terrible ones. I've just realized I always do that. Whenever it's a bad essay, it's always he did that, he did that. Whereas whenever it's a good essay or a good part of an essay, I was like, oh, she did this, she did that. So sorry about that. I don't know the gender of this student. Anyway, so a funny little thing. So the greed being analyzed, zooming in on a word, this is all really good. We don't have any context. Again, I think what I said earlier is what I would do for context to boost this to level 9. So Lanyon being a doctor, the Industrial Revolution, late Industrial Revolution when this was written, being obsessed with science and discovery. So the fact that he focuses in on the chemical reaction rather than Hyde's reaction shows that obsession with the scientific. And I think that you could make that a really good level 9 paragraph. Okay. Hyde warns Lanyon that what he sees next won't be good. It will blast his sight and will be so astonishing that even Satan would find it hard to believe. But Lanyon doesn't just listen to the warning because he doesn't really believe Hyde. Hyde is pleased that Lanyon has decided to watch. He says it is well. This is mean because it is going to be bad for Lanyon. Way too basic of a paragraph here, isn't it? Way too basic. So problem with this paragraph is, another thing you want to avoid in your answers, you don't want to actually explain the story. And that's what has been done here by this student. He, says that it will be astonishing, like Satan would find it hard to believe. Lanyon doesn't listen. He doesn't believe Hyde, so he decides to watch. This is just telling the story, right? Don't do that. That is a big no-no. That will get you a very low level. Instead, focus in on the language and the structure and how that has happened, how that has been used to create a certain relationship between the characters. So in this case, Hyde intimidates Lanyon with his language to try to scare Lanyon, but maybe Hyde sort of knows that Lanyon's curiosity as a doctor and a scientist will get the better of him. So when Hyde says it is well, we do get the sense of pleasure that Hyde wants to torment Lanyon. And to get this deeper though, for level 9, why would Hyde care about Lanyon wanting to watch? The answer is because Hyde is Dr. Jekyll's repressed self. Yeah. So the fact that Dr. Jekyll, so Lanyon talks about how Dr. Jekyll's work is unscientific balderdash. That's a quote from the novel, right? So the fact that Lanyon is now interested in Dr. Jekyll's work gives Dr. Jekyll a bit of a sense of revenge. He's managed to like get revenge on Lanyon because Lanyon never believed in Dr. Jekyll, never believed in his work. And yet now he's going to force Lanyon to watch, or Lanyon is choosing to watch, but it's going to force Lanyon to change his mind so that Lanyon will realize that Dr. Jekyll was right all along. Yeah. So that's how you get this to level 9. The other thing you would do is do context. You would talk about the id, the ego, and the superego. So obviously, Jekyll's id, his desires, his instincts would have been to force Lanyon to see his way of thinking about the world and thinking about science. And this through Hyde being like the id, is forcing that. Okay, in the rest of the story, Dr. Jekyll and Lanyon are enemies. They used to be friends, but they have fallen out and don't talk to each other anymore. Lanyon has told Utterson that he regards Jekyll as dead. That's a quote, so I would put in quote marks. In this part, Hyde is rude to Lanyon, even though Lanyon has gone to get the chemicals he wanted. Hyde is really Jekyll's alter ego, but Lanyon doesn't know that yet. Hyde is continuing Jekyll's fight with Lanyon, but Lanyon doesn't know that because he doesn't know who Hyde is. So the passage carries on the relationship between the two men in the rest of the story, except that Lanyon doesn't know it. Cool. So this one here, what we've got is this sense that the student is showing a very good understanding of the relationship between the characters. So that's really good. The problem, as I've said with a lot of this essay, this particular essay, unfortunately, doesn't have enough quotes. So we need some more quotes. The fact that Jekyll is, Lanyon regards Jekyll as dead, you could have analysed that. That would have been good. The quote I said about how Lanyon called Jekyll's work unscientific balderdash, that would be really good here. You could also put in some context, or you should put in some context here again. So with context for this one, I think that we would have to, I mean, to be honest with you, this is really just linking to what I said a minute ago. So again, I would talk about the id, the ego, and the superego. Final paragraph. After this, Lanyon is horrified by seeing Hyde's change into Jekyll and then hearing what Jekyll tells him, which he doesn't tell us. He says his life is shaken to its roots and he will die soon. Effectively, Jekyll and Hyde have killed him by letting him see the transformation and then explaining it all. So they have beaten Jekyll's enemy. It's too hard a punishment just because Lanyon didn't agree with Jekyll over science. Because Hyde is so evil, though, he is willing to do this to prove that he, Jekyll, was right all along. Good. So what he's talking about here, or she, or they, or I don't know who they are. I'm sorry. I just think it's a boy for some reason for this one. But they, the student, is saying that basically what I was saying about how it's really Jekyll achieving a goal, which is overcoming an enemy, which is Lanyon, right? But again, there's not enough analysis, there's not context, there's not really anything much outside of showing understanding. So this essay we'll probably get a level 4 or a level 5, being totally honest. Yeah, so it's pretty low. Every single paragraph has shown a fantastic understanding of the storyline, fantastic understanding of the characters, an understanding of how the characters relate to each other, which is really good. But what hasn't happened the whole way through, so please don't fall into this trap yourself, it hasn't analysed quotes really at all, pretty much the whole way through. There's barely any analysis of any quotes whatsoever. Even though they've included quotes sometimes, they haven't analysed them. That's a big problem. It's not enough to just put the quote in. You have to analyse it and explain it. And there's no context. Very little, if any, not really any context. So you absolutely have to have context. As we've read through, I've given you ideas of what context you could add at different points. But just remember with Jekyll and Hyde, the major contexts that you would talk about industrial revolution, lots of scientific discovery. You can talk about Victorian gentlemen. That didn't really fit into this one, but still Darwinism. So evolution as a theory being created, Origin of Species being written by Charles Darwin, and psychology, particularly Freudian psychology, the ego, the superego. If you include 2 or 3 of those in your essay and it links well, you will do fantastically well on your context. So yeah, I think that's everything from this essay. I hope that was a little bit helpful in showing you what not to do in an essay. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please do leave them down below. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.